she didn't envy me. Passing it off like CP3. Shawty, she calling me MVP. I be on time, it's something you ain't never seen before. They call me the Dama, really want my whole team to score. Damn, yeah, too icy, yeah, too clean, yeah, my zone, yeah, 2-3, yeah, got shooters that hit from deep, bust like Giannis, yeah, too mean. Bright lights like we at the garden, on P, don't get me started. Whole team walk, give me the party. If I can't make the play, I'ma lob it. If you jump, that's right on your head. Had to put him to sleep, go to bed. I'm a star, drop 50 and left. From the logo, like I'm Steph. Put it up, knock him down every time. Going hard like my life on the line. Catch me on the course, I would've down. Never losing, I put it on mine. Had to get on my shell, I've been laying low. Take it real when it comes to the playoffs. You fight with me, know it's a KO.
Hey, welcome back to another live podcast, live stream, whatever you want to call it. Another Pit Press Live, back with the gang. Got a lot to cover this evening. Lobos run away with a 19-point shellacking in Logan against a highly touted Utah State team. Really good team. We covered them in the last podcast. Highly efficient, but Lobos came out full claws. Defense really kind of strangled them there in the second half. But before we kind of get into kind of the nitty gritty of that game, I think I owe the show a proper introduction. Let me get to the cast of the Pit Press Live crew all the way from the Bay. Mr. Ricky Thompson, what's up, man?
I'm doing good. Ready to talk about it with the chat here, see what the fans have to say. And see what looks forward to Colorado State and another big challenge that lies ahead. But really proud of the way the Lobos played and an absolute dismantling of the Aggies in the final 15 minutes. So glad to see Nick here and Ed and chop it up with all you gentlemen.
Yeah, we do got a full crew tonight, only missing Ryan, but I always give Nick and Ed a hard time. I can't really decide which one is actually the better half of the Nunez duo. I'll go ahead and start with the senior first because we got to respect our elders. The voice of Western New Mexico Mustangs, ProView Network, and a Lobo fan since 1970. Mr. Ed Nunez, how you doing, sir?
Well, Eric, I appreciate that, man. And, like Rick said, a great victory. My wife and I just watched the second half about 2 hours ago and watched it again. So very impressive. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter to me who the better half is. I'm just glad my son's able to join us. Sometimes he can't. Sometimes we're not able to get on together. So I'm glad to be on with all of you.
Good to have you on. And we're joined by the younger and probably better looking Nunez, even though we could probably do away with the hair sometimes. But Nick, thanks for joining us tonight, man. Happy to have you on.
Eric, good evening. Dad, Rick, great to be with you guys. It's exciting. We were talking in our group text, and this is certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest win that Lobo basketball has had this season. So excited to break it down with you guys. I'll have to defer to my dad, Eric. He's definitely the better half. He's older. He's more seasoned, and I'm just lucky to be on this show with him and you guys. So excited to talk some Lobo basketball.
Well, I think we're all lucky to have everyone on tonight because I'm sure we have a lot to talk about. But before we get into the UNM Utah State breakdown, we do have some quick hits. Recent news broke tonight that UNM football coach Eck, they just hired a new general manager, which is kind of an interesting new role, but I think it's a vital position now with the new landscape of college athletics. I would kind of foresee this position kind of managing not only player development, recruitment, but also maintaining and managing a budget. Working closely with the NIL collective. I know that UNM has kind of like a partnership with the 505 Sports Venture Foundation with Kurt Roth and Mackenzie Bishop. and I know that they have like an alliance group, but I see this position also managing kind of like revenue sharing, because that's also going to be new coming up in the next calendar year. So I think some of the power fours are looking more towards a revenue share with some of the media revenue that's being kind of dictating the whole world within college sports now, but they're looking at dividing and conquering about 22 to 25 million dollars per year that they can share with student athletes. I don't think that UNM or the Mountain West will see that much money in revenue share, but there is going to be some money divided. That budget will have to be closely monitored and will play a vital role in signing new recruits, transfers, NIL portal, kind of all of that together. And um, the new hire, Bo Davidson, came over from Memphis. He was only there a year, but he was also responsible for putting together one of the top recruiting classes in the country for the Memphis Tigers, and definitely in the AAC. I think they had the top recruiting class in the conference. And I'm not sure that I don't think we really have the details yet on what his salary might look like, but I think this is a vital position. I kind of want to pass it over to you guys. Not sure if you guys had a chance to read the article or any more news on it, but Rick, I'll hand it over to you. What would you say about this hire?
Yeah, I think it's much needed, as you're mentioning, in the world today. I'm guessing he'll be working hand in hand with Jalen Dominguez, who seems to be uh, AD Lobo's right hand man, the leader of the Lobo club right now. Mr. Dominguez will be working hand in hand, I'm sure, with this gentleman. In this day and age, you see Bill Belichick just go to North Carolina. He brings a GM, none other than Michael Lombardi, who used to work at the Patriots with him. So this is not something that's uncommon. It sounds like the Lobos do have a surplus of money, maybe because Bronco did go out the door, and maybe this coaching staff that we brought in doesn't demand the budget that we were planning on using if they were to return Bronco and staff. So it seems like there's money to be managed, and now there's people to manage it. Lovo continues to make moves in the right direction in my mind, and this seems like a great move, someone that's had success. And per Rivals recruiting website, this guy got Mr. Bo Davidson got the number 2 overall recruiting class in the nation in 2024 transfer in the transfer portal. So transfer portal recruits in 2024, the recruiting class was ranked 2nd in the nation. So that sounds good to me. What do you think, Ed?
When I read that, I laughed to myself, and I thought, look at where we are in college athletics, that we were, hiring general managers to manage budgets, players in the transfer portal. But that's the nature of the game now. And I think it's good that New Mexico's getting on top of that. And when I think of Jason Eck, and I just think Lobo up. I keep thinking that when he was on with Ryan and I, Lobo up. And he's the complete opposite of Bronco Mendenhall, gregarious, outgoing, a star, a rock star, going up and down the pit, high-fiving everybody the last time I saw him there. So I think, again, he brought in the 2nd high-rated recruiting class. And if you look at the work New Mexico has put in recruiting so far, every time I open the paper, I'm like, man, again, you have to put it on the field. We don't know. We kind of, the schemes that Coach Eck wants. He's hiring different coaches every day. I like what I've seen so far. I like this move. I think in college athletics today, you're going to need that. Son, what did you think?
I think this hire is particularly important for a program like UNM, a mid-major like New Mexico, who needs the transfer portal to kind of build a roster. It's so hard to organically build from the ground up when you're a mid-major like New Mexico. I think all across college football, it's harder and harder to do that. More and more teams are using the transfer portal. But for a team like New Mexico that relies on transfers to build its roster, building its starting roster, Bo Davidson has the experience. Rick talked about it, what he accomplished at Memphis. I think he was at Georgia Tech before that. And Eric, the article that you sent us from Football Scoop indicated that Georgia Tech had one of the top 35 recruiting classes, which I think is pretty uncommon for Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech has been on the rise as a college football program. I think they've had back-to-back winning seasons for the first time in a long time. So to bring somebody with that kind of experience to UNM, it's exciting. I think Coach Eck talked about this at his introductory press conference. I want to say he was asked a question about bringing in a general manager. It's just what college athletics has kind of become, as what my dad was saying. One of the first GMs that was hired, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, is Adrian Wojnarowski. Woj was hired to be the GM for St. Bonaventure. So just seeing that position at UNM for UNM football, I think it's a great hire for Coach Eck and his staff.
Yeah, now I think it's only a matter of time before basketball gets a general manager to kind of do the same thing, assemble rosters, manage budgets, and all the above. So I think this is a big step in the right direction for Lobo football, and this is on top of some of the major recruiting news that they've had in the last couple of weeks. So it's really looking up. Buy stock now on Lobo football. Next, with this hit kind of Twitter today, top 10 point guards, and Rick, you're going to have to correct me. What was
Bob Cousy Award for best point guard in the nation.
One name that a lot of people were really upset that didn't make this top 10 list was Donovan Dent. And I think a lot of people, a lot of kind of big time names in the college basketball world, especially with like the Field of 68, those guys, Rob Douster, were really kind of disappointed. Kevin Sweeney from Sports Illustrated, kind of all calling out this committee for not having a Donovan Dent even mentioned in this. It was a crime because he's having an All-American type year, based on his stats alone, but just the impact he has on games. And I know this is one of those things that kind of just the disrespect almost going to motivate Donovan Dent, right? And kind of motivate the Lobos and his teammates around him to kind of go out and have something to prove and go out with the chip on your shoulder. So, Ed, I'm gonna pass this one over to you. What do you think this means? And would you say that the Mountain West and some of the Power 5 conferences, the ones that are like the lesser conferences, are just not getting the amount of respect that the big schools are getting?
I do think that number one comment is Bob Cousy, who was a heck of a player with the Boston Celtics and has been retired for many years. And I'm surprised that the award's still named after him. Nothing against Coos. I never even saw him play myself, and you guys know I'm old. I never even saw him play, so I was wondering why it's not the Magic Johnson Award or more current point guard. But that aside, I think New Mexico had a great game against Utah State on Saturday, and Donovan Dent, the commentator, was talking about. Coach Calhoun said that. My wife and I watched his press conference today, and they asked him about that, and he said, "You know what? Donovan Dent is one heck of a point guard. He makes great decisions." They asked, what was did New Mexico make a lot of adjustments? He didn't think they did. I thought that high ball screen, we'll talk about that later on, that zone really got him rolling downhill. But yes, somebody else mentioned today from a Utah State fan, why couldn't they stop him? And my comment was, not many teams have. St. John's did a good job on him. He didn't really get rolling against them, but everybody else he has. So I do think the Mountain West still doesn't get the respect. They're still saying, is New Mexico at large? They still have to build up that resume. That was a good quad one win on Saturday. But we all know it. New Mexico and the Mountain West, you think about it. If they didn't win the Mountain West tournament last year, they're out of the tournament, of the NCAA tournament. So even though that's a big win Saturday against Utah State at the Spectrum, they still have work to do. And it's a shame that Donovan Dent is not mentioned in amongst the nation's best, because we all believe he is.
Yeah, and maybe it's a bit of a moot point now, Ed, but the team that played St. John's is a much different team now.
Oh, yeah.
In conference. I think they're playing much better together. I think the earlier, more physical, tougher schedule kind of helped chisel these Lobos a little bit, right? They learned how to play at a different pace, at a different physicality level that's kind of demanded in some of these games, and it's starting to show, because in games last year, let's face it, they got bullied in some of them, Clemson being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're the ones kind of imposing that on teams now. They're the more physical team. They're the ones that are rebounding the ball more. But kind of want to get moving on. We have some more slides to share. I think they're for more later in the show. I will stop sharing this for now, but covering, let me just get these slides up. Sorry, I'm a little slow at this, but some quick hits. We just kind of covered that. Rick, I'm going to hand it over to you, since you had some of these other quick hits kind of from around the conference. I know we already covered the UNM football news, Davidson from Memphis, but do you want to cover some of the other games from the weekend real quick before we start going into the
Sure.
UNM and Utah State matchup?
San Diego State again has to crawl back against a bottom level team in the conference to beat Wyoming 63-61 in a wild one where Wyoming somehow scored 8 points in one possession down the stretch to still hang in it. Magoon Gwath having a monster week, was freshman of the week. He had 14 points, 11 rebounds, and he's really developing the past month, been freshman of the week the past 2 weeks, able to stretch the floor, already one of the best shot blockers in the nation, I believe still averaging over 3 blocks a game. But San Diego State still struggling to find their chemistry. I think Jones has been out at forward, forcing Heidi to play a lot more minutes, which isn't preferred by Coach Dutcher, I would think. There's still going to be a problem down the stretch. Boise State defeated Fresno easily, led by Andrew Meadows, 20 points. Degenart had 13 and 9. Nevada finally wins a game against their in-state rival over UNLV, 71-65. Nick Davidson led the way with 14 and 6 in Reno. UNLV still struggling, loses another tough game. On the ladies' side, we got the Lady Lobos. They lost over the weekend to San Diego State on a tough shooting night. Vianney Cumber only had 8 points on 3 of 13 shooting. Nayli Padilla off the bench led the way with 12.7 boards. Lobos now fall to 6-4 in conference, tied for 4th place, and they play Colorado State tomorrow in the pit, which is a big game for them. Look for them to get Destiny Hooks going. She wasn't very effective in that last one. And then just looking back on the men's overall standings now for the Mountain West Conference, UNM sits at the top at 10-1. Utah State now at 9-2, tied with Colorado State, followed by San Diego State at 8-3 and Boise at 7-4.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's kind of get right into it. And we're going to start with the defensive side of the ball, because I think that was probably one of the more telling storylines of this game. A really good Utah State team who has been extremely efficient shooting the ball this year. What did they average? About 86 points a game or something like that. I don't know where that ranks nationally, but I know it's up there. I know the Lobos are up there, but the Lobos held them to 37% shooting, 5 for 31, which comes in at 16% from the 3-point line. And Utah State lives at the 3-point line. I mean, for them just to kind of keep letting it fly kind of shows just the style of play. But it's really hard to put my finger on exactly what it was that kind of threw Utah State off, but I think it could be kind of a collection of things. Maybe overall ball pressure, the Lobos' length. I think they started to kind of adapt to what Utah State was running and started to anticipate some of those ball handoffs and just the overall rotation and switching of men. And then True Washington having a really solid game, kind of started on the defensive side, but his offensive game kind of flipped upside down and he had a really solid game. Nick, I want to start with you on this. What was your take defensively, staying focused on that point? Where do you think the Lobos kind of found some success in this game on the defensive side of the ball?
I thought they were fortunate that Utah State shot 5 of 31 from 3. I think I might be a little different from the group as far as my thoughts on UNM's defense, particularly in the first half. I mean, Utah State shot 4 of 18 from 3 in the first half. I thought a lot of their threes in the first half were good looks. A lot of those shots went in and out around the rim. There was one thing that I saw Utah State doing a lot of in the first half, and I think a lot of it was because Nelly was in foul trouble. He was on the bench a lot in the first half. But Utah State seemed to eventually get into a high ball screen with their ball handlers, Auberry, Drake Allen, Martinez, Falsliv. They would all come off this high ball pick. And when Atiki's in the game, he hedges out, but it's not a vertical hedge that forces the ball handler to go to the other side. I thought Utah State just attacked the rim off that ball screen, really got in the paint, really got some open shots that just really didn't go down. And I watched Danny Sprinkle's post-game interview with the Utah State media, and I mean, he said
Calhoun.
Sorry. Jared, thank you. You got me there. I was talking about Coach Calhoun, his post game interview, and he said 27 to 31 shots were good looks. In the second half, I thought it changed a little bit. I thought UNM kind of picked up the defensive intensity. Utah State finished with 9 turnovers in the first half, or in the game. They had 3 in the first half, 6 in the second half. You know, it really was that stretch, Eric, that we talked about on our group text that started at the 15-minute, 24-second mark in the second half. UNM goes on an 11-0 run. And if you look at kind of Utah State's possessions during that stretch, Akano misses a 3 at the 14:53 mark. Allen turns it over at 14:10. Falslev misses a layup. So they missed – I think they missed 3 or 4 shots in a row and turned the ball over during that stretch. And that was really the turning point of the game, fueled by, ball pressure by UNM, getting disruptive, Utah State missing shots. So I thought, all in all, UNM really anchored in defensively in the second half. Nelly wasn't in foul trouble as much. And I thought they played a good defensive game. You might be on mute, Eric.
Sorry about that. I wanted to pass this one over to Rick because I feel like he's the one that's kind of this whole season has been really high on a player like Ian Martinez and his impact on a game. And Ian Martinez did not have an effective game. I could say the same about Mason Falslev too. I just think they weren't very impactful. Martinez was 4 of 12 from the field. Falslev was 2 from 8 from the field. So 2 of the Utah State's primary scorers, guys that have the ball in their hands a lot. They go a combined 6 for 20 from the field. And then don't even get me started on the free throw shooting, but you can't win. I mean, Utah State can't win without production from 2 of their best players. Get into it.
No, and when both of those best players are wing players that, depend on making shots from the outside, and we're not, for some reason, going to the hole in the second half. And I understand what Nick is saying, what Coach Calhoun is saying, that a lot of shots or these are open. Well, just because, these shots are open doesn't make them good shots, right? Just because they're open, doesn't make them a good look in the offense. And the thing for Utah State is once they're not hitting from the outside, they're so dependent on that with 40% of their shots or more coming from 3-point on the air. They have zero post presence. What are they going to do? Throw it to Templin in the post? What are they going to do? Throw it to Gadaretzi in the post? I don't think so. So when they're not hitting threes, they're very one-dimensional. And especially in the second half, when they're not falling, as an offensive player, you have to start getting to the hoop, which they did a little bit, but then they weren't making free throws either, right? So it was a kind of a double-edged sword for them. I know we have this nice graphic here, Eric, about just how effective the Lobos defense has been, one of the best in the country per certain analytics. And since that VCU game, I think it's been their calling card. We can see here with some of the best teams in the nation, Lobos come in at 13th here in this defensive efficiency stat. So, True always brings it. Other guys always bring it. And that's going to be crucial down the stretch here because it's something they can bring on the road that will create energy. And we really saw it in the second half. And nothing makes me more happy than seeing Templin get frustrated out there. He kind of reminds me of like the bully on the Christmas movie that thinks he's all tough until someone slaps him back in the mouth and then he wants to go and cry. So that's just my thoughts on UNM's defense. It made Utah State want to cry. Drake Allen, he looked like he wanted to cry. I love him, but something was off in their heads, and it was due to UNM.
Ed, I want to hand this one off to you. And I always say it because I think you play the position, you probably understand it more than all of us do, but Nelly, a perfect 7 for 7 from the floor, finishes with 15 points, 13 boards. But what stood out in this game, the difference, we talked about it in the pregame podcast or live stream, the Lobos out-rebounded Utah State 48-33. A lot of that was behind the driving force of Nelly. Some of his defensive pressure too. Talk to me a little bit about Nelly's presence in this game, not just from a scoring standpoint, but from a rebounding and defensive standpoint.
He's out for most of the first half. It's 36-30 at the half. And if you remember, Utah State missed 4 free throws. Could have been 40-30. The free throw shooting for them was 10 of 23. Horrendous. Once Nelly, in the commentator mentioned, it's hard to get post-ups against the zone. They did, though. He said you have to try. Once they got him good post position down there, and that drop step is lethal. Gadarisi didn't do a bad job in the first half, but Nelly was out. And when he's out, New Mexico felt those effects of his presence down low. I thought the offensive rebound, my wife and I said, roll that back. We got an offensive rebound, kicked it out to the corner, I think to CJ. Boom, 3. Another possession, valued possession and another offensive rebound. Those offensive rebounds are huge. It gives you another possession. I thought the adjustment up front, that high pick and roll on the screen, on the defender on the zone, and then roll to the basket. They hit Donnie hit him twice for easy layups. When he's in the game, it's a huge difference. Atiki didn't do bad. He had 4 rebounds, but he's not Nelly Jr. Joseph. He's not. He doesn't have that kind of presence, but he's not a bad backup in 5 to 8 minutes increments. You can use him there, and they had to play him a little bit more because Nelly's in foul trouble. He's the Mountain West Conference Player of the Week for the 3rd time in the season. So I just want to go back to a couple of things too. But Nelly's presence was definitely felt. A 45-13 run to close the game, unbelievable. We mentioned some other guys. CJ Nolan, 11 points. Amzil, we get on his case. They weren't even sure he was going to play. I saw Patino's press conference. He said, but he was a game time decision. And if you've had plantar fasciitis, it's very painful. I think the week off and the treatment helped. Wednesday, we'll have to see how he bounces back. That's a tough bounce back after a tough game on Saturday. He makes a couple of plays during the game, and we're all going to say, oh, man, 16 points, man. 15 for Nelly Dent, 14 True, 13, and then CJ 11, and Milicevic, who I really am really liking a lot, 8 points and 3 rebounds. So, but back to your question, Eric, New Mexico doesn't win many games without Nelly Jr. Joseph, in the game. And when he came in, 7 of 7 from the field. When he came from Iona, did we actually think he was that good? I mean, I thought he was good, and then JT Toppin left, and the focus has been on him in the post, and he's really done a great job this season. So all accolades go out to him. And he mentioned after the game, Jeff Grammer asked him about True, and he said, hey, True's playing great. He's mentally tough. And that's what the Gerald Calhoun said after the game. New Mexico's mental focus and toughness in the second half really impressed me. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, okay. But I think back to Rick's point about Utah State's offense. Those are the looks they get. Those are the looks they usually make. They didn't make them. Are they good looks for them? Calhoun thought so. They didn't make them. But I thought New Mexico, and you mentioned Allen, in the second half travels twice. They fouled a 3-point shooter. They fouled Amzil. They were doing things that they normally don't do. Utah State doesn't play like that. So I thought New Mexico took control in the second half, and again, that 45-13 run to close the game tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue there. I'm going to change over to the second half adjustments. And I think one of the key focuses in the second half was to get Nelly the ball more, get Dent more downhill. And Ed, you made a really good point with UNM kind of keeping it together, because Utah State did not keep it together. Composure wise, you could just see the emotions kind of all over the place, not being able to kind of get in rhythm anywhere, and UNM really just speeding them up. But when UNM went down, I think they went down by as much as 11 in the first half with about 15 minutes left. There's a note here with Drake Allen's breakaway dunk to make it 48-39 Utah State at the 15:25 mark. In a tough road game like this, I mean, we've experienced it in the past with the Lobos. Like, they could have easily crumbled at that point of the game. And Utah State is a team that kind of thrives in those types of scenarios when other teams start sputtering. Utah State gets after some turnovers after loose balls, and they just convert them, and they just start drilling three after three after three, and that just didn't happen. UNM kept plugging it away, but I think a lot of that had to do with just the overall adjustment in the second half. And Rick, I'm going to pass this over to you to kind of get us kicked off. We talk about it a lot on the stream, on the podcast, but Patino's adjustments. We talk about when are they coming? When are the timeouts coming? What did you see in this game from the second half adjustments from Patino and kind of the overall team that stood out to you to where the Lobos were kind of able to finally grab control of this one?
Right, you're mentioning when Drake Allen got that steal for the nice one-handed dunk, and the Lobos go down 9 points. I'm thinking to myself, this could get out of hand. Coach P keeps his calm. Donnie keeps his calm. They don't call timeout. They come down. They run a pick and roll against the zone. They dump it right down to Nelly. Nelly gets an easy layup. That really led into a whole series of the end of the game where they found their different spots. They kept setting that pick at the top with Nelly. Donnie not always finding the roll man, but how many times did we see him whip the ball over his head to make that difficult skip pass? That's one of the hardest passes to make as a shorter player playing against taller guys. He's whipping it, no looking across the court to make the defense shift. When the defense shift, that allows that other wing player to then dump it inside to Nelly. But there were also times where he was going right over the top. Shots around the elbow, drives all the way to the hole. I think he and Nelly each only had 2 or 4 points at halftime. And once they kind of figured out how to break it down, guys began to hit shots. Amzo, a big shot to start the second half. Jovan, how does he do it? With the 3 fingers across the face. I love it. And like we said, once they saw a few go down, they began to play that villain role, right? True Washington with some monster rebounds right in their face, none bigger than that putback down the stretch. So it was a combination of effort, but also execution. They made, Templin look silly the way he was falling on the ground, and they just out hustled him, as well as found out, how to really beat that zone, and they executed fantastically. And it doesn't hurt when you out rebound them by 11 in the second half. It seemed like every miss Nelly was sucking up and grabbing. Very, very willing. Third-time conference player of the week. And I think after Dent and Clifford, Nelly might be the 3rd or 4th best player in this conference right now.
Yeah, I think in the second half, UNM shot the ball a whole lot better than they did in the first half. And Nick, you had some notes on the 3-point shooting specifically. I'm going to kick this one over to you and let you talk about it. But what did you see offensively from the Lobos in the second half that wasn't necessarily there in the first half?
They knocked down 6 threes. I mean, they were 6 for 13 from 3 in the second half. Amzil hits 2, Milicevic hits 2, CJ hits 1, True hits 2. The one True came in the first half, but they hit 6 threes in the second half. And I mean, you got to do that to beat a zone. We talked about going inside to Nelly. I thought they executed that pick and roll really well. But when you're able to spread the ball around on the 3-point line for a team like New Mexico that's in the bottom half of the conference in terms of 3-point shooting, you got to hit them when you need to. And UNM did just that. They shot well from 3. One thing that we haven't talked about that I think really helped UNM in the second half is second chance points. UNM gets 14 second chance points in the second half. Rick touched on this a little bit with Nelly, but there were a couple plays in particular in the second half that Nelly made that I thought were huge. Both were offensive rebounds. One at the 13:25 mark, Nelly gets an offensive rebound off a Donovan Dent take to the rim, and then he kicks it out to Jovan Milicevic for 3. That cuts the lead to 2. At the 9:18 mark, Nelly gets an offensive rebound and a putback that makes the score 58-53 UNM. So I think they just crashed the offensive glass really well, particularly in the second half. They won the rebound count 48-33. Coach Calhoun talked about it in his post game, said they just out-physicaled us. So 48-33 on the glass. When you're able to win the rebound count by that significant of a margin, you're going to create extra possessions for your team. UNM did that. They got offensive rebounds. They hit 3-point shots. And yeah, I think, just a balanced effort. That's the word that Coach Patino used in his post-game conference when in post-game talk when he spoke with Jeff Grammer. He said that they were balanced and they just got balanced production scoring. True in double figures, CJ in double figures, Amzil in double figures, Dent and Nelly in double figures. I just thought they spread the ball around really well, and they had a really good second half.
I think that's a good transition to our next segment, which is bench play. But I think you can kind of muddle that in there with just different, like more balanced attack. I think we've kind of seen over the course of the season that this is a team that definitely thrives and plays a lot better when Donovan Dent and Nelly are getting theirs. But it's the overall depth and the other guys, right? Like who's going to step up and contribute and score on those nights when they're going to need the scoring. And this game was kind of a perfect example of that, especially with Utah State playing that matchup zone like they do, trying to take away that Donovan Dent high pick and roll game, not really letting him get downhill in the first half. But he finally found a way. And I think they really made a strong emphasis of just making him more assertive, getting him in the lane. But when he did get in the lane, he made a lot of good decisions. He either went to the rim with it or he found his shooters. And some of those shooters that he found, CJ Nolan, Jovan Milicevic. Ed, I'm going to pass this over to you. What do you have to say about kind of the bench play, the guys that stepped up this game that I don't think UNM survives this game without the contribution of those guys that we don't usually see the consistent scoring from?
We mentioned on in the breakdown they're going to have to hit some corner threes. CJ hit one, Mustafa Amzil I think hit 2 or 1, but enough. My son is right. They don't shoot a lot of threes, but the threes they made were timely ones. Like, when we needed one, like, boom, there we go. Kick them back downhill. I thought they'd make a run, and then after a while, it was over, man. They didn't make any more runs after that. So we said that about, and CJ attacking the rim like that and almost throwing it, tomahawk down. I came out of my chair. I thought he made it. That kind of tells you the attitude that they had. They took no prisoners. CJ, the former football player, I've mentioned that length and strength. That guy's a strong guard, man. And I said we needed some shots from him on Saturday night, and he contributed. And Milicevic, one move that I saw him make, the fake, and then once dribble finish, he's shooting. And then like Rick says, throwing his 3 fingers up to the crowd. He's getting more confidence with each shot he takes. Even the last 3 that he made, they didn't need that last 3, but he stepped right into it and hit it. Shots within the offense. So the guys off the bench, Atiki, he didn't score a lot, 4 rebounds. They needed those rebounds, every one of them. So I thought the bench did their job, came in and contributed. And I thought Washington, they're 11-0 when he scored, and he scores in double figures. He had 13. And I think the confidence that he's shooting within the offense, catch and shoot, not trying to do too much. He gets in trouble when he tries to create at the rim. He's not the creator that Donnie is, but that's not a knock on him. Not I don't know. I've seen anybody create the way that dude is. He made another move in the lane. Dent did, and it was a beautiful move, and he just missed it. So everything goes around Donnie. Everything, like Rick said, the skip pass, the floor spacing. They were there. He found his shooters, and they knocked them down when they needed to. And again, going back to the bench, they contributed in a huge way. And that Applehands, he got a shot. He got a good look at it and didn't make it. But he got off the bench. So I thought the bench came in and really, and I think one of the commentators mentioned every player that played for New Mexico contributed in some way. Bordovichinen didn't score, but he had 4 rebounds. He's hit kind of a little bit of a wall, and they'll need him in the next couple of games. But I thought again the bench, as you mentioned, Eric came in and did a great job.
Yeah, and I guess I shouldn't have titled the segment the bench play. I think it should have been overall contribution from guys that we don't typically see it from. But one stat that is kind of often talked about is True Washington's play when he scores in double figures. I think the Lobos are 12-0 or 13-0. I know we talked about True a little bit earlier, but Rick, I wanted to get kind of your more in-depth take on True Washington's play, right? 13 points, not only playing well on the offensive side, but on the defensive side too. He's kind of the catalyst. And then his rebounding effort, he kind of set the tone for the game and really kind of carried the team's mojo, if you will, or kind of set the attitude.
Right, since he kind of had that mental lapse at San Jose State on that last play, he's turned it around. We know how important he is. 2 for 5 in this game, shooting around I think 38 to 40% from three this year, and shooting it with confidence. And when he takes shots within the offense, it gives him another dimension to it. But 8 rebounds, he's ripping it away from guys that are much larger than him. And he knows that his defense really gets him going. He knows it gets his team going. And the other guy, I think, Ed's already hitting on, but Amzil, just a monster game, playing with that injury, being the villain out there to the crowd. Some guys in the chat are mentioning how he was, blowing kisses to the crowd, pointing the bow and arrow, yelling at Templin down the stretch. So all those guys building their confidence is going to be critical, because we can't expect Nelly and Dent to have, what did they have last week in a game, both close to 20 or 30 points each, and are able to carry them. So it's good to see the Lobos be able to win in a variety of ways, right? They had 0 fast break points. We're going to get into that. I think they only had 4 against UNLV, but they're still able to find a way to score, which early in the season, they were really struggling in that half-court offense. So we're seeing that chemistry and that confidence build. And I think it kind of starts with True and Amzil, the 2 other main pegs in that puzzle.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep it right there with you and let you kind of introduce the last segment of we covered 3 topics each, kind of our keys to the game. For this one, do you want to kind of walk us through what did we get right and what did we get wrong?
Yeah, so we wanted to keep ourselves honest on the show and not just act like we preach up here and don't recognize things we say wrong. One thing I wanted to say first off, Mr. Ronnie Chavez did call out in the chat last game that Lobos were going to win by 9 points, and he said that CJ was going to have a big game. So before we get into our stuff, I want to give Ronnie some love. He called it. I was not thinking the Lobos would win by 9 points or more. That occurred. There he is. Yeah, he was already ready. To Ronnie, I was gonna give you your love, my guy. You didn't have to give it to yourself. But yeah, you were right. We were wrong. But something else we, the Pit Press, were wrong about in this game is what I was just mentioning. The Lobos calling card usually has been having to get out on the run, right, and get turnovers and push and transition. And they were able to win, this game with 0 points in transition, only 4 in the previous game. I thought that would be a critical piece, watching this team this year, really their strength. So I was dead wrong on that. One thing, though, we did get correct, and Ed was already touching on it, Nelly being decisive with the basketball, 7 for 7 for the field. Player of the week, obviously, but his defensive effectiveness at the top, really disrupting offenses around the conference. I think his defense kind of has gotten better quietly as we were ripping him at the beginning of the year for hedging too hard and things of that nature. He's been much more effective in my eyes. And then one other thing, I'll let one of you guys get into this, but we were just talking about scoring off the bench. But if you guys had to give an award to someone off the bench, who would it have been? Who do you think down the stretch is? Let me word it this way: who's going to be the most important player off the bench down the stretch here of conference play?
I'm gonna have to say CJ. I think we almost saw him body that dude on that dunk. It's the second time he's tried that in as many games recently, and I think he's gonna get one eventually. I didn't think he had that as part of his repertoire, but he's physical, man, and he is not afraid to attack the basket. I think once he kind of finds his shooting rhythm a little bit, then I think this team and him become really dangerous, because he's a career 39% three-point shooter. I think he's just struggled this year with kind of finding his stroke a little bit, but um who knows, man? That kind of comes second half conference play when we really need it the most. I'd probably have to say CJ. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just to play devil's advocate, I think Jovan Milicevic is starting to have a bigger role off the bench. 8 points off the bench, hits a timely 3 in the second half for this UNM team. I think we've all been pretty high on him. He did get Mountain West Freshman of the Week early on in January, I believe. And I just think ever since that point, his role has started to grow a little bit more. He's part of the permanent rotation. Wouldn't put his importance quite on the level of CJ's. Eric, I agree with everything that you just said about CJ. And I think CJ coming off the bench is the right role for him. He started at the beginning of the year and just really struggled shooting the basketball. But I think what he started to do in the second half of the season is really attack the basket. You guys talked about that, how he did that really well against Utah State in the first half too. You know, UNM did take a 17-15 lead in the first half. And I thought he was really aggressive going to the rim. And I think he's been really good going to the rim. But no, I think Jovan Milicevic is another guy who's seeing an increased role. He's a consistent three-point shooter. I don't have his stats up in front of me, but I feel like he's hit 2 threes in at least 2 of the last 3 or 4 games. So I look forward to him to continue to grow in his role off the bench.
Ed, what are your thoughts if you had to pick?
You know, I think one of the things that we talked about, Eric, I want to go back to something you said, though, about the schedule. It's steel the Lobos, right? It has. And then Coach Patino said, we need to get longer. And, you know, they did. So all these things have come together. And then you got a big, strong guard, stronger. I think they're stronger. You know, nothing against House and Mashburn. They're good players, but I think they're better now with Borovic. They're a better team. So I think it is CJ. I really do. And, you know, if you look at a couple weeks ago against San Jose State, he's going right into contact, you know, going into sides. You're not going to get that call, man. You're not. So I think now he's drawing fouls. He knows he's drawing fouls he did against Utah State, and he's going in with some power. I wish he'd have finished that dunk, but I think he'll get maybe 2 more before the season's. He's starting to play with confidence. So him drawing fouls, true drawing fouls, you know, down the stretch. Those were important plays. They really were, you know, because you don't want Utah State getting the ball back and getting any confidence when they're down. But I definitely think it's CJ and to my son's point, I like Milicevic a lot. He's shooting with more confidence and a big road win. They took the crowd out of the spectrum. Last 10 minutes, you didn't hear too much from them. You really didn't, and they were wild, man. They were kind of funny, some of the things they were saying. So you know, they're an entertaining bunch, but New Mexico silenced them, and so I think their play you mentioned off of the bench. I think the key. I don't think, and I think one of the things my son said, and Rick, that True has struggled shooting. Is it the pit? I mean, I'm sorry, CJ and Mustafa struggled for a while at the pit last year. CJ's had better shooting on the road than he has at home. We haven't seen him break out yet at home, and I still think that's coming. I really do.
I tell you, if CJ puts down that dunk, the game might have ended early. That was gonna be something. That might have caused an earthquake in Logan because he's a larger fellow and he was coming down with cruel intentions. I'll move on though to the last part of our right and wrong segment here. Previously, we said the Lobos will need to make more threes and use a 3-ball as an equalizer if they want to hang in this game. Obviously, Lobos went 7 for 22, and the Aggies were 5 of 31. I think previously the Lobos had only made 3 threes in their game versus UNLV, and they all came within like the first 2 minutes of that game. So this was a little bit better, but like Ed was saying, it might not have been the volume of threes, but they were timely. They were when the Lobos really needed them, when, you know, the lead was close to getting out of hand or they had a chance to extend it. Amzil with 2 daggers, Jovan with 2 other daggers, and then CJ with 1. True had 2 as well, and that gives you 7. So if they're able to hit 7 to 10 a game, I don't think that's asking too much. They're capable of doing that. So that's the last thing that we got correctly based off our last thoughts.
The timing was everything with the threes in the second half. They 1 for 9 in the first half, and then six for whatever it was, 6 for 12 or 6 for 13 in the second half. And that's kind of when they started to pull away, or actually part of the comeback when they were down, that run that they made, the 45-15 run or whatever it was. But nonetheless, they scored 25 points, or outscored Utah State by 25 points alone in the second half. They made more threes than Utah State did, 7 compared to 5. Really tough shooting night for Utah State. I think in about 2 weeks, I think it's actually the 16th not this Saturday, but next, Utah State comes to town, I mean, you have to expect that Utah State has a better shooting night on the floor than they did. I don't think they have a repeat performance at 5 for 31. It's just they have so many weapons, and it was a coincidence that they just so happened to be all off that night. I think the Lobos defense did kind of force them into some maybe some tough shot makes, but Nick, you kind of talked about it earlier on. There were, I forgot what Calhoun said. A lot of those shots were uncontested, unchallenged, and Utah State just didn't knock it down. So, um, before we kind of get into Colorado State a little bit, is there anything that you would be looking for, particularly with the rematch in 2 weeks against Utah State?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of basketball to be played between now and then. We'll kind of see where these teams are in the next 2 weeks. But, I think from a toughness perspective, you can't get out rebounded 48-33. And I know Utah State plays small with Templin. They're undersized a lot on the floor, but they never lose the rebounding margin like that. If you look at where their stats are, as far as where they fall in the conference, the rebounding margin, you cannot lose it for 48-33. So, Utah State got handed a pretty bad loss at the Pit last year. If you guys remember, I think they were ranked, I want to say they were number 16. They might have been a little lower than that. I can't remember exactly. But no, I mean, you want to play your best against the best. And I think, yeah, they'll play with more toughness, more physicality. And then, yeah, just echoing your point, Eric, I expect them to shoot better than 5 for 31. From 3. And I do see that comment from Miguel Sanchez. USU shooters, mainly Martinez, have lost confidence, shows in free throws. I think he's had kind of back-to-back rough shooting performances. I think, also from the free throw line as well. And I mean, that's got to kill your confidence in of itself. When you miss free throws, you lose confidence. And he didn't shoot well from the line against UNM. He didn't shoot well from the line in Utah State's previous game. So, yeah, I think he is going through some confidence issues.
Yep. Okay. Well, looking forward to this week's games. I know that Wyoming plays Utah State tomorrow. UNM. Go ahead, Rick. Did you?
I got one
have a
last
second or what?
question because
Yeah, go ahead.
just because we have the referee here and people were talking about, I'll make it quick. Referee in that game body bumped Jared Calhoun and during a timeout with about 4 minutes left. Have you ever body checked a coach while you're officiating? And do you think that was necessary? Should he be suspended?
Calhoun talked about that. He said afterward, I've never had that
He
happen.
looked scared during the time, by the way.
Yeah, he said all the years he's coached, he's only had a handful of technicals. And no, I've never came close to doing that. Yeah, that never happened. But yeah, Calhoun said that needs to be looked at. And he didn't say anything like yell or scream about it either. He's just like, hey, I've never gotten a lot of technicals. So yeah, that needs to be looked at. He says that's never happened. And I'll tell you one thing, there's no place for that, for officials doing that. Look, when I made calls and some of them were emotional, it was like this, flat face. Even when I teed anybody, never emotion. I tried not to. It didn't, because then they're going to say, oh, you're mad and all kinds. It doesn't matter. Whatever call you make anyway, someone's going to get mad. 50% of the gym is mad at whatever you call. So, yeah, I did hear that. And I saw Coach Calhoun talk about that. And if that referee did that, believe me, he will be suspended and could be fired. So, yeah.
While we're talking about refs real quick, this was a comment that I don't know if it was Ronnie Chavez. Eric, maybe you can pull it up, but they asked about the JT Toppin ejection in Texas Tech's win over Houston. I don't know if you guys got the chance to see the replay of that. I watched it, and I mean, I share the sentiment of JT Toppin and Texas Tech coach McCasland. I thought it was an awful call. Reading the ESPN article on it, per NCAA rules, a flagrant foul 2, which is what they assessed JT Toppin, is considered a personal foul that involves contact with an opponent that is not only excessive, but also severe, parentheses, brutal, harsh, cruel, or extreme, parentheses, dangerous, punishing. Any contact by the offending player to the groin area of an opponent which is not clearly accidental. If you didn't see the play, JT Toppin is getting trapped by 2 Houston defenders. He jumps up to pass the ball kind of falls back, and his back leg naturally kicks up into the Houston player's groin area. To me, it just seemed like a natural basketball play that could have happened to anybody. And they assessed him a flagrant 2 ejection. And then Texas Tech coach McCaslin got ejected for that as well. So, tough call. I think that, the article I read in ESPN said that the AD is going to take action with the Big 12. And I think that needs to be looked at, because I thought it was a pretty bad call.
What happened 4 minutes into the game too? Toppin's their leading rebounder and leading scorer. So you take out their number 1 player, take out the coach, and it's like, I mean, I was still shocked they actually came away with a win against a really tough Houston team on the road, all grit. But Rick, you had something to say about it?
No, I don't think it was intentional, like a Draymond Green-esque move that we saw in the finals a few years back. My only other comment on JT Toppin, other than I love his play, is that I want to hear all Lobo fans stop saying, can you imagine if we had Toppin? Can you imagine if we had Toppin? Can you imagine if Utah State had Great Osabar and Josh Udeze? Can you imagine if San Diego State had Micah Parrish and Lamont Butler? Yeah, we'd be playing in a different conference right now, guys. So let's stop saying the what if game with Toppin. I enjoyed his time here, and I follow him just like everyone else does. But we got to stop playing that game, because every team could be saying, what if we brought back our best player from last year, right? So those are my only other comments on Toppin. Let's keep it moving.
In terms of keeping it moving, though, Colorado State comes to the pit on Wednesday. Surprise, surprise, Donovan Dent has a competitor for Mountain West Player of the Year in Neat Clifford, who's having a really solid season. God, I saw the stat. I should have prepped it to kind of show on the screen with this live stream, but he had like 3 consecutive games of scoring in the 20s. He was averaging a double-double, and the guy was literally just on fire. He had a really nice pass that made top 10 Sports Center, kind of threw it behind his head, found the cutter. The guy's a legit NBA prospect. If he's not a late first rounder, then he's definitely going second round. He's got a wingspan. He's 6'6", 6'7", but he plays like a point guard, and he's definitely kind of the driving catalyst, the driving force for Colorado State. But the Lobos handled them pretty, I wouldn't say easily in that first matchup. I think that the firepower that UNM had was just a little bit too much for Utah State to handle. But Utah State does have some key pieces that definitely can contribute. I know that Buchanan, the NAIA transfer, had a decent game in the first matchup. Lobos really had a hard time matching up with him because he was kind of like a tweener, right? He was kind of like a forward, kind of like a 3, so they couldn't match up with him real well. He had a nice feel for the game, kind of a nice mid-range kind of elbow area, but he was getting down low and making some shots. What do you guys have to say about Colorado State? And we'll keep it brief because we're coming up on an hour now, but looking forward to Wednesday. I will kick it over to you, Ed.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, last time 76-68, UNM on top. UNM outscored them 41-25 in the first half. CSU outscored the Lobos 43-35 in the second. Clifford 17-7, and UNM had pretty good balanced scoring that first game. So, but since CSU was defeated by UNM, they've won 7 of 8, and their only loss is to San Diego State. So they're on a roll coming in to the pit. They've made 173s, 3-point shots on the season. They shoot 32% from 3. Clifford at 17.7 and 9.6 rebounds has made 34 threes. So, you know what? It's another test for UNM, and it's one they. You know what though? I got to say with this real quick. I like Coach Pitino's approach, one game at a time. Let's not get too hyped. They asked him about Utah State, and he said that, hey, one game at a time. It's a game on our schedule. We have to be prepared, and it's the same thing with Colorado State. They beat them over there in Fort Collins, and since then, as I mentioned, Colorado State playing much better. So UNM needs to be ready.
Nick, I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, that first game, it was the first half that was the difference for UNM. They went on a 21-0 scoring run in that first half, generated a lot of Colorado State turnovers, got out on the fast break, And that really was the difference in the game. Colorado State tried to make it interesting late. But Colorado State, a team that is second in the Mountain West Conference in total assists. Utah State is first, I believe, at 19 assists per game. Colorado State is second at 17 assists per game. I went back and listened to Coach Pitino's post-game talk with Jeff Grammer after the Colorado State game, and he used an analogy. He said you can't let Tom Brady just sit in the pocket and pick you apart. And that's why his message to the team was we need to apply ball pressure, disrupt, get in the passing lanes, and make them uncomfortable. Colorado State, they're not a team that plays up and down. They don't play in transition. They execute their half-court sets really well. They run a lot of pin downs for Clifford. They run him off a lot of ball screens. I thought we talked about it. Borovichinen did a heck of a job on him in the first game. He's going to need to bring it again in the second game. Expects Colorado State to be ready. And Colorado State, I believe, has won 4 in a row coming in this game. So I think it's going to be competitive.
Rick, what do you think? I know that you're a big fan of Nick Dunning, but
Nick
Clifford, sorry.
Yeah, Nick is definitely. He was at NBA camps last year. He'll be getting drafted hopefully this year. Just probably the best all-around defender in the conference. One of the best rebounders at his 6'6", 6'7" size. He did score 17 points in the last matchup, but it took 17 shots to get there, and that was a lot due to Philly B and that hard defense he played. Also for CSU, Jalen Crocker Johnson, who's a transfer, was Ohio Valley Conference Freshman of the Year last year. He gave the Lobos 13 last game. He can stretch it from the forward position, but the difference really is going to be down low again. Can Rashad Memba battle with Nelly? Can Kyle Jorgensen, the freshman from Colorado, come off the bench and give some fouls on Nelly, because that's where the Lobos are going to be able to feast, I believe. Nelly just an unstoppable force the last few weeks, and I don't know if CSU has the bodies to stop him down low unless they get him into some type of foul trouble, because that's the only thing that's really slowed the Lobos down. When we saw in San Jose, Nelly was out almost half the game, and they ended up losing. And the other thing that's kind of funny to me, just talking about, I guess, the season as a whole, and people saying, the Lobos could be undefeated very easily in conference play, but they could also have 2 losses very easily if it wasn't for Nelly's miraculous shot against Nevada. So let's not forget how close that one was, along how close the San Jose State game was. So I think they sit right where they belong right now. It's just hard to believe they're at the top, even though, months ago we thought they would be here, but now seeing it all play out, it's just been a great ride, and I'm looking forward to this game this week.
Yep, and we will plan on revisiting with you guys towards the end of the week, recapping the Colorado State game. We'll probably try to get some thoughts out on that game via Twitter. We'll be there. Press row, I'll probably be on the floor, but I do want to give some proper exposure to our sponsor for the Pit Press Live, Affordable Solar, a local commercial and residential solar company based out of Albuquerque. They do kind of service the state in all different areas. I think they're actually considering opening a branch or office in Santa Fe. So if you are considering solar for your residential or commercial space, I'd give them a call. I know Neil really well over there, and I hear they're running a good ship, and want to give them a thank you for sponsoring the live show. But we want to thank you guys, the viewers, the listeners, everyone that kind of jumps on and gives us support and actually comments on the show. We see you. We appreciate you guys getting involved and engaged. We want to encourage more of that. But until next time, my name's Eric Moulton. This is Ed Nunez, Nick Nunez, Ricky Thompson. Thanks for watching the Pit Press Live. We'll catch you on the flip side.